In this video, we're going to look at finding the nth term of a sequence and then using it to answer some further questions. Let's take a look at this first example. We've got a sequence and we need to do two things. Part A, we need to find the 100th term of this sequence. And for part B, we need to decide whether 44 is going to be in this sequence somewhere. So let's start with part A. Obviously, a really slow way of doing that would be just to list out the terms of this sequence all the way up to the 100th term. We know it's going up in steps of 3, and we could do that, but it would take ages. So let's find the nth term instead. If you've seen the previous video, you should be able to do that. So just pause the video and work out the nth term of this sequence. You should have found that the nth term is 3n plus 5. It's like our 3 times table because it's going up in steps of 3, but it's been shifted up by 5. So instead of 3, 6, 9, 12 and so on, we've just added 5 to each of those numbers. So the nth term of this sequence is 3n plus 5, but that's not the answer to this question. What we're looking for is the 100th term. So to find the 100th term, what we want is n to be 100. Then we would get the 100th term. And that would be 3 times 100 plus 5. 3 times 100 is 300 plus the 5 gives us 305. So the 100th term of the sequence is 305. Next, we're looking at part B. We need to decide if 44 is in this sequence. If 44 is in this sequence, that means 3n plus 5 equals 44 for a particular value of n that has to be a positive integer, a positive whole number. So let's solve this equation and see if that is the case. Gives me n equals 13. Now that is a positive whole number. And that tells me that 44 is a term in this sequence, and in fact it is the 13th term of the sequence. So the answer is yes, it is the 13th term. Here's question 2. Pause the video and have a go at this one for yourself. Here's the answer. This sequence is going down in steps of 6, so if we look for the nth term, we're going to get an nth term that is negative 6n plus whatever we need to add on to our negative 6 times table to turn it into this sequence. And that is in fact 128. If you're not sure about getting this, you need to go back and watch the first video in this particular topic. Now, the question was asking us for the 100th term, so we need to just substitute n equals 100. The 100th term would simply be negative 6 times 100, which is negative 600. And then we need to add on 128, which would give us negative 472. Moving on to part B. If 44 is in this sequence, then we should be able to find a positive integer value of n where this turns out to be 44. So we want to solve negative 6n plus 128 equals 44. If I subtract 128 off both sides, I get negative 6n equals negative 84. And if I divide both sides by negative 6, that gives me n equals 14. Now this is a positive whole number, so that tells me that 44 is a term in this sequence, and in fact it is going to be the 14th term. Here's the third and final question. Pause the video and have a go at this for yourself. Here's the answer. Let's find the nth term first of all. This sequence is going up in steps of 8, so it's like our 8 times table, which means the nth term is going to be of the form 8n plus or minus something, And what we're actually doing to the 8 times table, 8, 16, 24 and so on, is subtracting 17. So the nth term is 8n minus 17. That means the 100th term is what we get when n is 100. So when n is 100, we have 8 times 100, which is 800, and then we subtract 17, and that gives us 783. So the 100th term of this sequence is 783. Now we need to decide whether 44 is in this sequence. In this particular case, it's probably easier just to keep on adding 8 and seeing if we get 44. But just to show the previous skill, I'm going to set up an equation and try and solve it. So what we're looking for is when 8n minus 17 equals 44. If I add 17 to the left and to the right, I get 8n equals 61. And if I divide the left and the right by 8, I get n equals 61 over 8. Now that is not a whole number. It's not a positive integer. So that tells me 44 is not a term in this sequence.